The evening shift always left Naomi Brooks with aching knees, damp sleeves, and a kind of tired that lived in her bones. But she never let it show when she stepped off the bus and walked the last blocks home through Harbor City's old ferry district. The sidewalks were cracked, the neon signs were half broken, and a wet wind came off the water that made paper stick to the curb and made the gulls cry like rusty hinges. She carried a canvas tote with an extra pair of worn sneakers and a plastic container of leftover stew from the Cartwright mansion, where she scrubbed marble floors to a shine and polished rails so smooth her own reflection looked surprised to find itself in a world that expensive. She had promised herself long ago to never bring bitterness back with her. The house could keep its gold frames and crystal bowls, because the best thing in Naomi's life was not inside any rich home. It was a simple one-bedroom apartment over a bakery that smelled like cinnamon in the mornings and yeast at night, and a promise she kept to her sister's memory to be the kind of woman a child could run toward. Naomi climbed the short hill from the bus stop, the sky low and heavy, and when she cut through the ferry terminal parking structure to save 5 minutes, she told herself, like always, that the shortcut was safe enough if you walked steady and kept your eyes open and listened to the wind. She did not expect to hear a small sound that did not belong to wind or gulls or tires on wet concrete. It was a hiccup of a sound, like a breath caught in the throat, and it came from the shadow where the stairlight flickered and hummed. Naomi stopped, toed on her hip, heart tapping twice, then went toward the sound because that was who she was. She crouched slowly, knees complaining, and saw a little girl curled up behind the steel column, her dress wrinkled, her knees dusty, her hands clamped around a soft toy so worn its fur had gone smooth. The girl's hair was tangled, and there was a smudge of black on her cheek, and the look in her eyes when she glanced up at Naomi was a look Naomi knew too well from the mirror on bad days. I do not know where I belong, but I am trying not to cry. Hey there, honey, Naomi said, soft, not crowding her, one palm open at her side. The way she had learned with the children at church when storms rattled the windows and new faces came in scared. I'm Naomi, it's cold in here. Your mama nearby? Your daddy? The little girl shook her head once and then shook harder, like she was trying to shake the fear out of her bones. I woke up, she said, voice thin like a leaf, and the car was loud but no one was there, and then the car was gone. The words came out wrong and right at the same time, like pieces of a puzzle. Naomi did not ask the first angry questions that wanted to jump out. Who leaves a child alone in a parking garage? What kind of world is this because questions do? Not warm hands and they do not make someone feel safe? She shrugged her tote down, took the extra sweater from the bottom, and laid it on the concrete between them like a small bridge. This is clean, baby, she said. Smells a little like bleach, but it's warm. You can sit on it or wear it, your choice. Can I sit with you? The girl hesitated, then nodded, and Naomi sat cross-legged on the sweater's edge so the girl could have most of it. The air tasted like cold metal, a drip echoed somewhere far. A late ferry horn blew and made the concrete seem to hum under them. Naomi smiled with her mouth and with her eyes because children know the difference. What's your name? She asked. Layla, the girl said, hugging the soft toy closer. This is Bear. He's not a bear anymore, but I still call him Bear. Naomi nodded like this was grand news. Layla and Bear, good team. Would you like some water, Lila and Bear? I have a bottle. It's not fancy water, but it's cold. Lila reached out with small fingers and took it, sipped like she did not trust too much kindness at once, then handed it back with both hands. Careful, grateful, old-fashioned polite in a way that made Naomi's chest pull tight. Thank you, Lila whispered. You're welcome, Naomi said. Now listen, we can do a few things. We can go to the ferry office together and tell them you need help. We can call a number and ask for officers to come, and we can wait where it's bright. We can also walk to my apartment 2 blocks away where it's warm and there is soup, and I can call from there. But you will choose because your choice matters. Layla glanced toward the open ramp where headlights slid past like fish in a river. She looked back at Naomi, at the sweater, at Bear, at the water bottle. Is your place safe? She asked. Safe as I can make it, Naomi said. I have good locks. I live over a bakery that sends up bread smells like a hug. My neighbor Miss Alma keeps watch like a hawk and feeds me collards when I look tired. I can call from there and stay right next to you while we figure things out. You won't be alone. Leela breathed in, breathed out, then whispered, "Soup." They walked under the red exit sign like it was a small sunrise. Naomi wrapped her coat around Leila's shoulders and put the tote strap across her own chest, like a seatbelt, as she kept her body between the girl and the dark edges of the concrete where shadows pooled. On the street, the wind came harder, tipping a newspaper rack and lifting the edges of a billboard that showed a man in a perfect suit smiling like he owned the horizon. Naomi did not look up to read the name because men in perfect suits never looked down to read hers. They climbed the narrow stair behind the bakery, the wood steps groaning in the sweet air. When they reached Naomi's door, painted a hopeful blue last spring, she knocked twice out of habit to warn Miss Alma that a friend was coming. Inside, the apartment was small and honest. A couch with a clean throw, a table with 2 chairs, a shelf with books that looked like old friends. A picture of Naomi's sister on the wall, smiling with her eyes closed like she was listening to music only she could hear. Naomi turned on the kettle, warmed the stew, and set out a bowl with the small, careful pride of a woman who knows that feeding someone is a holy thing. Leila sat on the couch with Bear in her lap, toes tucked under the hem of Naomi's spare sweater, eyes tracking every movement like a bird that wants to trust the hand with the seed. "Do you like carrots?" Naomi asked, ladling stew. "I like them if they're soft," Leila said, a tiny crease appearing where worry had lived too long on a small forehead. "Soft it is," Naomi said. "Bread, too. I'll butter it heavy. Butter makes hard days softer." They ate in the warm quiet, the spoon sounds gentle, the bread tearing like soft paper, the bakery's late mixer thumping below like a heartbeat. When Lila had finished and licked a shine from her spoon by habit, Naomi washed the dish right away and set it to dry, because small order makes big fear less loud. Then she pulled her old flip phone from the counter and set it down without touching it. "Now we talk about calls," she said. "We can call the city missing children line. We can call the 911. We can call a church friend who works nights at the shelter and knows people at the family office. We can also wait until morning and walk into the precinct together. I will not let go of your hand, but tell me what you want." Leila looked at the phone like it might bite. "If we call right now," she said, "will they be mad at me?" Naomi shook her head. "No, baby. They should be mad at anyone who didn't keep you safe." Leila nodded in a slow, thinking way that did not belong to 6 years old. "Can I sleep first?" she asked. "Just a little?" Naomi's throat pulled, but she made her smile bright and simple. "Yes," she said. "We can sleep first. We can do hard things better after rest. You take my bed tonight and I'll take the couch. I change sheets often. They smell like sun when there is sun." She showed Lila the bathroom, the clean towel, the lemon soap, the toothbrush still in its wrapper that she kept for guests, even though the only guests she had were the kind of days that took their shoes off without asking. Leila brushed her teeth, like she'd been taught to be neat so nobody would get mad about the toothpaste, and then she climbed into a bed that creaked but held her like a palm. Naomi tucked a blanket up under Leila's chin and found an old nightlight in the drawer, a tiny moon that glowed just enough to tell the dark to back up. "Do you want the door open?" Naomi asked. "A crack," Leila said, holding Bear's ear like a prayer. "A crack is good," Naomi said. "A crack says I'm close." She turned to go, but Leila's voice stopped her. "Are you really coming back?" It was not a dramatic question, just a small one that weighed as much as a house. Naomi turned back, put a hand over her own chest. "I promise," she said. "When I make a promise, it sits right here until I keep it." Leila's eyes softened. "Okay," she whispered, and sleep took her the way sleep takes children when a grown-up's word is heavier than fear. Naomi sat on the couch and did not turn on the television. She did not scroll or fuss or cry. She wrapped her own arms around her waist and breathed in the smell of cinnamon coming up through the floor. She thought about the Cartwright house, with its spotless limestone and the way her footsteps made almost no sound. The way money makes everything quiet that might tell the truth. She thought about the ferry parking structure and how many lost things it had swallowed over the years' gloves. Receipts, good intentions, and how tonight it had given up a child who wanted soup. She thought about her sister, gone 3 summers now, and the last thing she had said from the hospital bed when the July heat pressed even the curtains down. Be the house with the light on. Nay, be the door that opens. Naomi had tried in little ways, a plate left for the boy down the hall whose mama worked doubles. A set of towels in a bag for the woman who had left the shelter in a hurry. A pair of second-hand soccer cleats for a kid who ran like he had wings but kept falling because his shoes had holes. Tonight felt bigger than a plate or a towel. It felt like standing in a river and telling the water you are not afraid to get wet. Naomi looked at the phone again and then at the door to the small bedroom, where the nightlight threw a soft oval on the floor. She did not trust the system that should care. She had watched it fail people like her too many times. But she also knew that hiding could turn into harm when the sun came up and the world started counting. A child needed to be returned, and returned right. Naomi picked up the phone and, instead of 911, dialed a number she knew by heart. The church line that went to Reverend Hale's cell at night. The man who did not waste words and did not waste time. He answered on the second ring with a voice that sounded like old wood and warm tea. Naomi, he said, and she could hear a smile even at that hour. It's late, child. You okay? She told him everything in a steady line, no drama, no apology. He listened and then said, You did right? I'll call Ruth at Family Services. The one who drinks bitter coffee and hates paperwork, but does what's right because it's right. Keep the child with you. Lock the door. Do not open for anyone who does not say Ruth's full name. Text it, Naomi thanked him, and after she hung up, a message came through with a simple sentence that felt like a shield. Ruth Delgado is coming at first light. Naomi typed back a prayer hand emoji because it was the easiest way to say thank you. When your eyes were tired and your heart was busy, she lay down on the couch with the old quilt that had belonged to her grandmother, the one with fabric squares. From dresses, long turned into memories, and she did not sleep right away. Outside, a siren cried and then quieted. A car door slammed and then laughter rose and floated and died. Somewhere a radio played an old song about a woman who believed in something she could not see. Naomi thought about Lila's hands, clean and careful, holding a spoon like it might break. She thought about the way the girl had asked, Is your place safe? As if the world had taught her already to make a list in her head. Safe, not safe maybe. She thought about the man on the billboard with the sky smile and the words she had not bothered to read, because sometimes ignoring a grin that big was how you kept your feet on the ground. She drifted, woke, drifted again. And each time she woke she listened for the small breathing in the next room, the tiny whistle that said not alone, not lost, not tonight. Dawn in Harbor City crawled slow and gray, the kind that makes you guess the time, and Naomi got up before the bakery mixers roared to life. She boiled water for oatmeal, cut a banana into coins, and put sugar in a bowl for sprinkling because sugar in the morning is a song for scared hearts. Layla padded out barefoot. Hair a little tamed by sleep, bare slung over one shoulder. She looked at the window like she needed to know what kind of day it wanted to be, then looked at Naomi and smiled the quietest smile, the kind of smile that says, I believe you kept your promise. Morning, Naomi said. I made the kind of oatmeal that sticks to your ribs so fear can't push you over. Layla giggled in a small burst, and the sound made the blue door seem to glow. They ate together, and Naomi talked about small things on purpose, the bakery cat who acted like a prince, the seagull that stole a whole donut once and looked very proud about it, the way the ferry captain waved at the same old man every morning, like it was a game, and when the knock came at the door, it was 3 taps and a pause, the rhythm the Reverend had promised, and Naomi looked through the peephole and saw a woman in a plain dark jacket with a badge clipped low and tired eyes that said she had seen both sorrow and hope and had not given up on either. Miss Brooks? The woman said when Naomi opened the chain. I'm Ruth Delgado, Reverend Hale called. May I come in? Naomi unlatched the chain and stepped back and did what she always did when strangers entered her space. She let her shoulders say you are welcome, and she let her eyes say I will protect what is mine. Ruth smiled at Lila in a way that was soft and professional at once. Hi, sweetheart, she said. I'm here to help you get home. Lila pressed her lips together and hugged Bear and looked at Naomi like a boat looks at a lighthouse. We will be gentle, Naomi said, not a question. We will be thorough, Ruth said, a promise. She set a folder on the table and pulled out a small device and took a statement in words Lila could reach, not the kind that turned children into files. She asked about colors the car might have been, about the smell, about the sound of the horn, about any words she remembered hearing before she fell asleep. Layla answered slowly and Ruth wrote slowly, and Naomi poured coffee for Ruth and hot chocolate for Leela, and for an hour the apartment turned into a place where the truth could take its shoes off and stay a while. When the door knocked a second time, it was not 3 taps and a pause. It was the kind of knock that makes a lock want to be a wall. Ruth lifted a hand, a small motion that said wait. She moved to the door and looked through the peephole and then looked back at Naomi, her face still, her voice quiet. There are 2 men in suits in the hall, she said. One is holding a phone like it is a badge. He says he is a representative of the Vale family. Naomi did not recognize the name because she did not play the game where boardroom names are baseball cards. But Ruth's mouth tightened a fraction in a way that said the name was heavy. What do they want? Naomi asked, not afraid so much. As tired of the ways power knocks without being invited. Ruth cracked the door on the chain and spoke, through the gap in a voice that had filed 1,000 forms and had fought twice that many. This is a protected visit. You may leave a card. We will schedule a safe appointment. The man in the hall spoke too loudly, as if volume could climb through a chain. You will open this door, he said. You are holding the child of Adrian Vale. Naomi's breath hitched because the billboard's name had just stepped off. The horizon, Ruth did not flinch. We will inform Mr. Vale that his child is safe, she said. He will meet us at the district office with documentation. If you continue to pound on this door, you will be recorded doing so. The man muttered something about lawyers and footsteps retreated, and Ruth looked at Naomi and let out one long, slow breath that made her shoulders sink an inch. I am sorry, she said. The world moves fast when cameras are nearby. He's a very powerful man. But power does not get to skip steps today. Naomi nodded once and felt a strange calm settle, the kind that lives under rivers when storms dance on the surface. She looked at Leela, who was staring at the blue door as if it might turn into a mouth and swallow the room. Naomi walked over and knelt until their faces were level, and she reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind Leela's ear the way her own sister had done for her before school on mornings when the bus was late and life felt like a shoe too tight. You are safe, Naomi said, simple and true. We will go to an office where there are chairs that squeak and old posters on the wall and a water cooler that tastes like dust. Your daddy will come there and he will show his papers, and nobody will take you anywhere until Ms. Ruth says it is right. And I will be right beside you as long as you want me to be. Layla's eyes filled but did not spill. What if he is mad? She whispered. Naomi's own memories woke the years of small Angers thrown across counters by people who would never have to worry about rent. The way tempers bounce off money and stick to those who have none, but she did not put those in the room. She put in only what Lila needed. Then we will stand taller, Naomi said. Because being mad is not the same as being right. They left the apartment in a small line. Ruth first with her clipboard and her tired, noble eyes. Layla next with Bear tucked like a secret under her arm. Naomi last with her tote and her keys and her quiet. Miss Alma cracked her door and called softly, You need anything, Nay? And Naomi smiled back. I'll bring you the story later. Because stories are a currency in neighborhoods like theirs, and good ones buy courage. On the street, a black SUV idled like a Wolf holding a cough, and a man on a phone pretended not to look at them while looking very hard. Ruth led them past the SUV without a word, and Naomi kept her body on the side that could take a shove. A shove came, because you learned a plan for what hurt might do even while you are hoping it has learned some manners. The family services office was 6 blocks away, a squat brick building that had lost its glossy paint years ago and had decided to wear its work honestly. Ruth buzzed them in through the side door to avoid the lobby where anger tends to hang around waiting for an audience. She showed them to a small interview room with a table, 3 chairs, a box of tissues, and a fish tank where 2 bored guppies played tag like they knew more than the posters on the wall. "Wait here," Ruth said. "I am going to check the intake desk and confirm documentation on the Vale contact." She left, and the room hummed with the kind of quiet that tells secrets. Layla traced a finger along the rim of the water cup and watched a guppy consider its reflection. Naomi folded her hands and unfolded them and thought about the hardest thing she had learned in her 48 years, how to keep breathing when someone rich walked in angry and made the air feel rented. The door opened again, and the air changed like weather when a front moves through. He looked taller than the billboard because shame makes us smaller and certainty makes us large. He wore the kind of suit that does not wrinkle even when a life does. His hair was neat, and his jaw had that stubborn line men learn when nobody tells them no until the first time late in life. His eyes went to Lila in a single quiet break, and something in his chest softened without permission, the way ice makes room for the river when spring comes whether it wants to or not. "Lila," he said, voice low. The child stood but did not run. She lifted Bear and pressed him to her face, more shield than friend. "Daddy," she said, soft as a small apology she did not owe anyone. He took a step and then stopped when Naomi stepped to a tiny movement, a natural law, a caretaking reflex carved from years of being the grown-up who does not look away. He looked at Naomi, then really looked, and his gaze tried to do what 1,000 gazes had done to her before. Weigh, sort, price. Naomi did not blink. She did not shift. She let her eyes say what her mouth did not. "I am a house with a light, and you do not get to turn it off." Ruth slid in behind him with a folder and took a place at the table like a referee with scripture under her arm. "Mr. Vale," she said, brisk but not unkind, "we will sit, we will confirm. Then we will talk about next steps." He sat because the room made him small enough to obey. He slid papers across, and the papers were proper. Money does not forget to bring its paperwork. Ruth read them and nodded and entered the numbers into a computer that hummed like a tired bee. "All right," she said after the printer coughed and the guppies blew in different bubbles. "Lila is yours legally." "That is not in dispute?" "But there is a report to file about last night. There is a child's account to preserve. There is a question to answer about how a 6-year-old came to be alone in a public parking structure after dark." He swallowed, and Naomi heard the dry sound of pride trying to climb down a ladder. "I did not leave her," he said. "I believe she was with someone I trusted. I was mistaken." Ruth nodded like she had heard all the words a city can shape, and could still tell a truth from an excuse. "We will document," she said, "and we will set a follow-up. For now, your daughter will go home with you. Miss Brooks has provided temporary care and acted appropriately. She will be noted as a safe contact." Layla's shoulders dipped, a small relief like a bird that had expected a window and found open sky. Naomi stood and adjusted the sweater on Layla's shoulders, and for a second the room held a breath no one wanted to break. "Thank you," he said then to Naomi, but the words were thin at the edges like paper that had gotten wet and dried. Crooked, Naomi nodded once. "You're welcome," she said, because grace does not need polish to be real. She could have left then. Many would have. But she could feel something else pressing at the edges of the moment, a truth that wanted to be born, and she had promised herself that this year she would not help fear hold the door shut. "Mr. Vale," she said, voice calm enough to cut without hurting, "do you know why your daughter ate every spoonful like she thought the bowl might disappear?" He blinked, a fraction too slow. "Excuse me? Do you know why she asked me 3 times if my place was safe? Why she wanted the door cracked a little but not too much?" His mouth tightened. "Are you implying—" Naomi lifted a palm, not to silence but to slow. "I'm saying there is a child in this room who watched grown-ups forget that she Is a person and not a piece of cargo we pass between stops? I'm saying that if there are people around you who love your power more than they love your little girl, you will need to learn to see it before she learns to stop asking to be seen. He stared at her like a man who has just tasted a thing he has always eaten and for the first time notices it is salted with his own hands. Layla reached for his sleeve, then tiny fingers, tiny trust. He looked down and then back up, and something in his gaze shifted, not into humility yet, but into a direction where humility lived. I will do better, he said, and the words sounded like a promise he was making mostly to himself. Ruth clicked her pen closed. We will all do better, she said. For now, you can take your daughter home. Miss Brooks, I'll walk you out as well. In the hallway, Naomi paused at the water fountain and took a sip that tasted like dust and tin and long days. Ruth touched her elbow. Gratitude passing between women who have learned to keep their thank yous small so they don't fly away. You did right, Ruth said. Today and last night. Naomi smiled, a tired curve that still knew how to be a sunrise. I know, she said, not from pride, but from the steady certainty that grows in a life of small, faithful choices. She walked out into the late morning light, the city already louder, horns and voices and seagulls arguing over a dropped roll. Across the street, a news van idled, camera pointed at the building as if truth might step out in a clean suit. And pose, Naomi tucked her chin, not ashamed, just uninterested in a lens that did not know her name yesterday. She took the long way home on purpose, past the mural of the woman with a basket on her head and a sky in her eyes, past the corner where Mr. Lewis sold newspapers even though people read their phones, past the bus stop where teenagers laughed too loud because joy is free and they knew it. She climbed the bakery stairs in a slow rhythm and unlocked her blue door and stood inside the quiet. The bed was still messy from the small sleep of a girl who had carried fear like a backpack. The bowl in the rack shone with the last drop of water slipping from its edge. Naomi sat and rubbed the place between her eyebrows, where worry liked to sit, and she let herself feel the tired all the way. On the table her phone buzzed, a number she did not know. She almost let it pass to nowhere, but something said answer. She did, and the voice on the line was the kind of careful that follows apology. Miss Brooks, the man said, this is Adrian Vale. The billboard had learned her name. I don't expect you to take my call, he went on, words measured like steps on ice. But I wanted to say this and not let a screen do it for me. Thank you for seeing my daughter last night when I did not. Thank you for feeding her. Thank you for staying. Naomi listened and said nothing, because sometimes silence is the truest mirror. He filled it with the thing he had called to. Say, if you are willing, he said, I would like to speak with you again. I would like to learn what I do not know. I would like to ask if you would consider being part of the circle of people around my child who tell me the truth even when it is heavy. I will understand if you say no. Naomi looked at the small nightlight sitting on the counter where she had placed it after unplugging it, a tiny moon now quiet and round. She looked at her blue door. She looked at her hands, the lines of bleach and work and time. I do not join circles that are made to look good, she said, voice even. I stand in circles that keep children safe. If you want that, then we can talk. He breathed out, just once, and she could hear him nod even though she could not. See him. I want that, he said. Then we will see, Naomi said, and she hung up gentle because not every door needs to slam to make a point. She made herself tea and added honey and squeezed the mug between both palms, the way you hold a truth so it can warm you without spilling. Outside, the bakery bell jingled, and Miss Alma's laugh rose like a hymn, and the city went on being itself, sharp and sweet. Naomi sat at her wooden table and took out the envelope of bills she kept in the tin marked flour, even though it held savings, not grain. She counted because counting is how you tell yourself you still have choices. She had just enough to make it through the month and maybe fix the drip under the sink if she asked Mr. Lewis to help. She did not have the kind of money that moves doors on smooth hinges in big buildings, but she had the kind that feeds a child at midnight and knows who to call at dawn. She looked at the blue door again. She thought about being a house with a light on. She thought about how last night that light had been enough for one small girl and a tired Teddy. She thought about how sometimes if you keep a light on long enough, it grows into something that scares the dark. She did not know yet that people would take out their phones and argue about her name by dinner, that photos taken without her permission would join a stream that never dries, that the man with the suit would find himself cracked open in places. That had grown hard and expensive. She did not know that the knock that had tried to be a battering ram would return in a different rhythm, not quite humble but not so loud. She did not know that a city can choose to watch a story or join it. What she knew, standing to wash her own mug and hang the towel just so, was simple and enough. Last night she had not walked past. Last night she had said, "You choose." Last night she had fed a child, left the door cracked a little, and kept her promise. And sometimes that is how big things start, not with speeches and lights and cameras, but with soup in a chipped bowl and a woman whose name the rich do not know deciding that her light will stay on, even if the wind rattles the windows. The week after Naomi had returned Lila to her father should have been quiet, should have been the kind of week where you let your shoulders drop, your mind unclench, and your home return to its usual rhythm of cinnamon from the bakery below and gospel humming from Miss Alma's radio through the thin walls. But quiet never comes when a truth has been let out of its cage. On Monday morning, as Naomi was sweeping the landing outside her apartment, a young man in a collared shirt and jeans stopped at the bottom of the bakery stairs. He wasn't carrying bread or waiting for coffee. He was holding a camera bag and looking up like he was trying to memorize the color of her door. Naomi knew the type freelancers chasing a story, not a paycheck, willing to stand in drizzle or wend for hours if it meant catching a photo that might be worth something. She gripped the broom handle, not to threaten, but to remind herself. She was holding on to something solid. "You're Ms. Brooks, right?" He called up, voice polite but too loud for a residential street. She didn't answer. Silence was sometimes stronger than no. He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to ask about the parking garage night, about Mr. Vale's daughter." That name in someone else's mouth was a spark to dry wood. Naomi didn't move. "I'm not your story," she said finally. "If you want truth, you talk to the girl's father. Or the girl herself, if she ever wants to speak. You don't take my words and twist them into something you can sell." His face fell, just enough to tell her he'd heard that before from people with more to lose, and he backed away without pushing. She watched him walk down the block, then turned and went inside. Her heart steady but her stomach tight, because if one reporter had found her, others would follow, and curiosity had a way of crowding out air. By Wednesday, she was proven right. 3 more knocks came, one soft and hesitant, one insistent and rhythmic like someone trying to sound important, and one that was a fist instead of a hand. The first was a volunteer from a local advocacy group who wanted her to speak at a youth forum about resilience. The second was a man with a clipboard conducting a community impact survey who seemed less interested in her opinions than in her connection to Adrian Vale. The third was an anonymous delivery of a padded envelope containing nothing but a printed photo of Naomi walking with Lila toward the family services building. There was no note, no sender. The image was cropped tight, but Naomi recognized the faint blur of the black SUV's chrome in the background. She slipped the photo into the same drawer where she kept her sister's obituary and the hospital bracelet from her grandson's birthplaces, where important things lived until they found their moment. She told no one, not even Miss Alma, because sometimes telling meant dragging others into shadows they didn't need to stand in. Meanwhile, at the far end of the city, in a glass tower that reflected clouds like it was afraid of the ground, Adrian Vale was having his own week of unwanted mirrors. The board of directors for Vale Media Group had called an emergency session, not about quarterly losses or advertising shifts, but about him. "The footage is still circulating," the chairman said, sliding a tablet across the long table. On its screen, frozen in the act of stepping toward Naomi, was Adrian's face from that night in the garage, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, one hand mid-gesture toward his daughter. "It's bad optics," the chairman went on. "There are petitions calling for your resignation from the philanthropic arms of the company." And there's pressure to release a statement beyond the one-sentence PR note you approved. Adrian sat back, feeling the unfamiliar heat of being cornered. For years he had been the man holding the cards, deciding which narratives lived and which died. Now he was a headline that wouldn't fade, a photograph that strangers argued over like it was a symbol instead of a moment. "I'll handle it," he said finally, voice low. "But not the way you think." The chairman blinked, thrown off balance. "You mean, I'm going to find out why a woman I dismissed knew more about my daughter's safety in 1 hour than I did in a month." The room fell silent, not out of agreement, but because no one knew what to do with a rich man talking like that. On Thursday afternoon, Naomi was elbow-deep in soapy water at the church kitchen when her phone buzzed on the counter. The number was unfamiliar but not blocked. She dried her hands and answered with the simple "hello" she used for everyone, whether they were family or strangers. "It's Adrian Vale," the voice said, careful, like it knew the name might be a door. Slam. She didn't reply right away, so he filled the space. "I'm calling because I've been, looking into the facility you warned me about, and into the people around me. You were right. About more than I wanted to believe." Naomi leaned against the counter, the hum of the old refrigerator filling the pause. "I'm not here to be right," she said. "I'm here to keep a promise to a child." He breathed out through the phone, a sound like someone setting down a heavy box. "I'd like to meet. Not for cameras, for Lila, for a kind of truth I can't get from reports." Naomi considered the sink, the peeling paint on the far wall, the way her hands still smelled faintly of bleach. "I don't meet in towers," she said. "If you want to talk, you come where you can't hide behind glass." To her surprise, he agreed without flinching, named the place. She chose Harbor Park, down by the water where children ran between swings and fishermen told lies to pass the time. Saturday came with a pale sun and a wind that made the flags on the marina snap like applause. Naomi arrived first, sitting on the bench near the stone wall, her tote beside her, a thermos of coffee in her lap. Adrian arrived with no entourage, wearing a dark sweater instead of a suit, his eyes scanning until they landed on her. He looked like a man trying not to look out of place and almost succeeding. He sat 2 feet away, enough space for choice. "She asks us about you," he said without preamble. "Draws you sometimes, in crayon." Naomi sipped her coffee. "Children remember how you make them feel, not what you say." "I fed her and didn't rush her, that's all." He shook his head. "It's not all. You saw her. I've been around her without seeing her for months." There was no pride in his tone, only the kind of regret that doesn't expect comfort. "Then start now," Naomi said. "But starting means clearing the people who think she's a photo prop. It means making room for her to tell you things you won't want to hear." Adrian nodded slowly, watching a gull dip and rise above the pier. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of it," he admitted. Naomi turned to him, steady. "Ready or not, she's already living it. Your choice is whether you meet her there." They spoke for nearly an hour, not in grand confessions, but in the small details that tell you more than any headline: how Lila likes her toast barely warm, how she hums to herself when she's building with blocks, how she refuses to wear shoes with tags still on them because they scratch. When they parted, Adrian didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he said, "Would you consider seeing her again as a friend she trusts?" Naomi thought of the nightlight, of the promise that had sat in her chest until morning. "We'll see," she said, and meant it. She watched him walk away along the marina path, his shadow stretching long on the planks, and wondered if men like him could really change, or if they only learned better words. That night, Naomi dreamed of her sister for the first time in months. In the dream, they were both sitting at the blue door, watching a storm roll over the water. Her sister turned to her and said, "You can't keep every child out of the rain." "Nay, but you can keep the light on so they know where to run." Naomi woke before dawn, the bakery still dark below, and sat with the dream until the sky began to pale. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew this. The circle around Lila had to widen, not for the sake of appearances, but for the sake of the little girl with the worn toy and the eyes that had learned too soon to ask if a place was safe, the days that followed. Naomi's meeting with Adrian at Harbor Park carried a strange weight as though the air around her life had thickened. Nothing explosive happened, no reporters at the door, no angry phone calls, but there was a shift, a quiet change in the current beneath the surface. It started with the bakery downstairs. Miss Alma, who usually spoke in bursts of gossip and laughter, began slipping extra rolls into Naomi's paper bag without saying a word, her eyes lingering in a way that told Naomi she had been paying attention to the whispers on the block. The neighborhood had its own way of processing a story. No one asked her outright about the billionaire's child, but corners of conversations would fall silent when she walked past, and once or twice she caught someone nodding at her in a way that was part respect, part curiosity, part warning. Naomi understood. In places like Harbor City's Ferry District, stories could make you a hero and a target in the same breath. On a Wednesday morning thick with mist off the water, Naomi was mopping the vestibule at Cartwright's, the mansion, where she worked her longest shift, when she heard her phone buzz against the side of her tote. She almost didn't check, but the sound was sharp in the otherwise muffled house. It was a text from an unknown number. "She's asking for you again." That was all it said, but Naomi knew. She dried her hands, wiped the phone on her apron, and typed back, "Who is this?" Seconds later came the reply, "It's Adrian." There was no preamble, no title before his name, no corporate signature. Just the man. "If you're free this weekend, I'd like you to join us at the aquarium. I think it would make her happy." Naomi stared at the words until her reflection blurred in the polished marble floor. She could hear the faint hum of the Cartwrights. Central air, the distant clink of Mrs. Cartwright's teacup from the sunroom. This wasn't the kind of request you gave a quick yes to, not because she didn't want to see Layla, but because the setting mattered. She wasn't about to step into a staged photo op or let herself be positioned as a prop in a man's redemption arc. She typed slowly, "If it's for her, I'll come, but no cameras. And no speeches." The reply came faster this time. "Understood, Saturday." Arrived with a thin sun and a brittle wind off the harbor. Naomi dressed in her best dark slacks and a cream sweater her sister had once given her, soft from years of careful washing. At the aquarium entrance, she found Adrian waiting in a charcoal coat, Leela at his side in a red peacoat with brass buttons, Bear tucked under one arm. The child's face lit up the moment she spotted Naomi, and without a word she ran forward, throwing small arms around Naomi's waist. Naomi bent, returning the embrace with a steady warmth. "Hey there, Lila and Bear," she said. "How's the sea treating you today?" Lila grinned. "We saw jellyfish. They look like ghosts, but they don't scare me." Inside, they moved slowly through the exhibits, pausing wherever Lila's attention caught a swirl of silver fish darting as one, a turtle gliding like a piece of the ocean come to life, the hypnotic drift of kelp in a tall tank. Adrian hung back more than Naomi expected, letting Layla set the pace. He asked small questions but didn't press, and when she darted to Naomi's side to tug her toward a new discovery, he didn't try to interrupt. Naomi noticed these things. She also noticed the way Lila kept glancing up at her father, checking for something she couldn't name, maybe approval, maybe safety, maybe the absence of whatever had frightened her before. Halfway through, they found themselves in the shark tunnel, glass arched above and around them, slow, certain predators sliding past like living shadows. Lila pressed her small hands to the glass, eyes wide. "Do they ever get lonely?" she asked, voice echoing in the curved space. Naomi crouched beside her. "Not like we do. The ocean's their whole world. But sometimes," she added, glancing at Adrian, "even the strongest need to know someone's watching their back." Layla nodded solemnly as though this made perfect sense. They ended the afternoon at the touch pool, where Layla ran her fingers over the ridged back of a starfish, her laughter soft but real. As they walked out into the fading light, Adrian cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It's different when you're here. She's different." Naomi studied him for a moment, then looked down at Lila swinging Bear by one arm. Maybe she just knows she doesn't have to be anything but herself, Naomi said. That's what children do when they're safe. Adrian didn't answer right away. He just nodded, as if turning the words over in his mind like stones in a pocket. Back in her apartment that evening, Naomi sat on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea, the sounds of the bakery closing up drifting through the floor. She thought about the way Lila had leaned against her at the Shark Tunnel, the quiet steadiness of that small shoulder against her arm. She also thought about Adrian's silences, not the ones filled with judgment like in the parking garage that night, but the new kind, the ones that suggested he was beginning to listen. She wasn't ready to call it trust, but it was movement. And movement was something. What Naomi didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that the same night, in a penthouse 30 floors above the city, Adrian Vale sat in his study with a folder open on his desk. Inside were reports his private investigator had compiled, financial irregularities in the facility Lila had been sent to, emails implicating 2 of his own board members in quietly funding similar institutions, and a list of names including one Naomi recognized from the headlines as high-profile donors. The web was larger than he'd imagined and more tangled. He reached for his phone twice to call her, to tell her what he'd found, but each time he set it down. It wasn't ready, he wasn't ready. But soon he knew the circle was going to widen again, and not everyone in it would be there to keep children safe. And somewhere between the bakery's cooling ovens and the city's glass towers, the wind shifted over Harbor City, carrying the scent of salt and change. The first real crack in the fragile calm came the following Thursday, when Naomi stepped out of the church pantry just before dusk and found a black sedan idling across the street. The engine was quiet enough that she wouldn't have noticed if not for the faint, rhythmic click of a turn signal on, off, though no turn was being made. She slowed, balancing the box of canned goods on her hip, and let her eyes skim the car without staring. Tinted windows, spotless paint, city plates. Someone with money and discretion. She didn't alter her pace, didn't let her body betray the prickling at the back of her neck. But when she reached her building, she paused in the shadow of the stairwell, long enough to watch the sedan ease away. No one got out. No one waved. It was as if the car had only been there to take her measure. Inside, she unpacked the pantry donations in neat stacks on her kitchen table, but her mind was elsewhere. This wasn't the first odd thing since Layla had come into her life. There had been the cropped photo in the envelope, the strangers asking careful questions, but this was different. This felt like someone waiting, not for a moment to pounce, but for a reason to. Naomi had lived long enough to know that the most dangerous people didn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes they came in silence and polished steel. That night, as rain tapped against the blue door, her phone buzzed again with a number she now recognized instantly. "It's Adrian. Can you talk?" She hesitated, then replied, "Go ahead." His voice, when it came through, was low and taut like a rope drawn too tight. "I think I've found the root of it. The facility wasn't just negligence, it was business, profitable business. There are other places like it, feeding off kids no one notices are missing, especially if they're from families without resources." To fight back, Naomi set her mug down slowly. "And you're telling me this because—" There was a pause, the kind where you can almost hear someone debating how much to reveal. "Because I'm not sure who else I can tell without it disappearing. And because Leela isn't safe if these people think she knows anything?" Naomi leaned back, the old couch springs groaning under her. "You mean if they think we know anything?" She could almost hear him nod. "I'm putting together evidence, bank transfers, emails, testimony, but some of it will only stand if someone outside my circle can vouch for what they've seen." She understood immediately. "You want me to be that someone." "I want you to be the truth they can't ignore," he said. The next morning, Naomi met Adrian in a corner booth at a quiet diner near the edge of the harbor, a place with cracked vinyl seats and coffee strong enough to burn the fog out of your head. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "This is everything I've verified so far. It's ugly, and it names people with long reach." Naomi didn't touch it immediately. She looked at him instead, steady. Before I open this, I need you to answer something. Are you in this because you're trying to make things right or because you're trying to wash your hands clean? His eyes met hers without flinching. Maybe both. But I'm learning one doesn't happen without the other. She opened the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of email chains, spreadsheets of transactions labeled with vague phrases like special care package and behavior adjustment program, and a list of facility names that made her stomach tighten. Several had notes beside them, dates, amounts, initials she didn't recognize. What happens if this goes public? She asked quietly. Best case, Adrian said, a handful of places shut down. Some people lose their seats and kids get moved somewhere safe. Worst case, people like you and me become targets. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain had stopped, but her mind was full of storms. She thought about Lila's small hand pressed to the glass at the aquarium, about the way she had asked if sharks got lonely. She thought about all the other children whose names no one wrote down, whose fear never made it into a file. She thought about her sister's words be the door that opens and realized that doors didn't just let people in. Sometimes they had to let the light out, so it reached places that had been dark for too long. By Sunday, she had made her choice. When Adrian called again, she told him, if we do this, we do it without hiding. No anonymous leaks, no whispered tips, my face, my name. The truth can't be faceless or they'll just make a new lie. There was a long silence on the line before he said, you're braver than I am. Naomi shook her head even though he couldn't see it. No, I'm just tired of being afraid. Neither of them knew then how quickly things would accelerate. How the sedan would return, this time with someone in the back seat watching her building. How an anonymous letter would arrive at the bakery addressed only to the Maid, warning her to keep out of rich people's business. How a reporter with real integrity would catch wind of the story and insist on meeting her in person. But Naomi could feel it coming, like the deep thrum in the air before a fairy horn sounds an announcement you can't stop, only brace for. And somewhere in a city that liked to pretend its glass towers were untouchable, the first hairline fractures were beginning to form. By the time the following week rolled in, Harbor City's air had a tautness Naomi could feel in her teeth, the kind of invisible charge that came before a lightning strike. The black sedan had shown up twice more, never pulling in close, never rolling a window down, just sitting far enough away to make it impossible to prove it was following her, but close enough to stain her mornings with unease. Miss Alma noticed it too. That's no delivery man, she muttered one morning as they stood on the bakery's back steps, sipping tea before the ovens roared to life. Naomi didn't answer because in their neighborhood you didn't speak threats into full sentences unless you were ready to act on them. But she also didn't lie. She just said, I know. 2 days later, the tension finally cracked. It happened in the middle of Naomi's shift at Cartwright's. While she was polishing the brass handles on the east wing doors, her phone buzzed. Twice, then stopped. She checked during her water break and saw a single text from an unknown number. You're in over your head. Back away. There was no signature, but the shape of the threat was familiar, tight, efficient, meant to sting, but not leave a fingerprint. Naomi stared at it for a long moment, then powered the phone down. If someone wanted to scare her, they'd have to do better than a line of shadow on a screen. That evening, she took the long way home, weaving through side streets where the brick was old and the lamp-post buzzed faintly. She needed the extra minutes to think. By the time she reached her blue door, she had made her decision. She would not tell Adrian about the message. Not yet. He was already neck-deep in his own battles, and she wanted to be sure of her ground before she stepped onto his. Instead, she called Simone Graves, the attorney who had once handled a wrongful eviction case for a neighbor and won. Simone listened, without interrupting, then said, if they're warning you off, it's because they think you're about to land somewhere that matters. That means you keep going, but we do it with eyes open. They agreed to meet in her office the next day. Simone's office was nothing like Adrian's glass and marble empire. It was a second-floor walk-up above a bookstore. with plants on the windowsill and the faint smell of paper and ink in the air. Naomi spread the contents of the manila envelope Adrian had given her across Simone's desk. Simone read in silence, her brow tightening as she flipped through spreadsheets and emails. "This is bad," she said finally. "Not just morally bad, criminal bad. And it's tangled with people who have the means to bury it." Naomi nodded. "So we don't let them?" Simone smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. "That's the spirit. But spirit alone won't keep you from being crushed. We're going to build a wall of witnesses, corroboration, and records so high that even the tallest lie can't climb over it." The next 2 weeks blurred into a rhythm Naomi had never known before. Her mornings still began with work at the mansion, afternoons at the church pantry, evenings at Simone's office or on the phone with people who were willing finally to talk. Former employees from the facility, parents who'd pulled their children out and carried scars of their own from the fight, a school counselor who had recognized patterns of neglect but been ignored by her superiors. Naomi became not just a witness but a thread connecting them all. She kept her tone calm, her manner steady, but inside she felt something growing, an unshakable resolve that had nothing to do with money or reputation. One rainy night, as she and Simone were closing up the office, her phone rang. It was Adrian. His voice was tighter than usual. "They're moving money," he said. "I traced 2 transfers out of the foundation accounts into a shell company overseas. It's happening faster now. They know we're circling in." Naomi stood at the window, watching the rain bead and slide down the glass. "Then we move faster, too." She could hear him exhale, and for a moment the line was quiet except for the hum of the city in the background. "You've got more grit than half the people I've worked with in my life," he said. Naomi allowed herself a small laugh. "Grit's cheaper than gold, but it holds better." The storm broke, not in the sky but in the press. An investigative journalist from a respected outlet Simone had discreetly brought into the loop published a detailed piece outlining the network of behavioral facilities tied to anonymous donations from elite families, including evidence from Adrian's own company records. Names were named. Connections were drawn. And near the end, in plain language, was a paragraph about a housekeeper named Naomi Brooks who had found the lost child and refused to be silent about what she'd learned. By the following morning, the story was everywhere. Some people called her a hero. Others painted her as an opportunist chasing her 15 minutes. Strangers sent letters of support. Others sent thinly veiled threats. But the most telling reaction came from the black sedan. It didn't return, not that week, not the next. Naomi knew better than to think it meant safety, but absence, even temporary, is its own kind of message. Still, the fight was far from over. Lawsuits began flying between implicated donors. Facilities shuttered overnight with children relocated in chaotic haste. And whispers reached Naomi that one of the named investors was trying to buy silence from key witnesses. She brought it to Simone immediately, who said, "Then we put them under oath before they can disappear." It was only a matter of time before Naomi herself would be called to testify, not in some quiet deposition, but in a courtroom where the air would be heavy with money and malice. She knew it was coming. And she knew that when it did, she'd walk in the same way she had walked into that parking garage the night she found Layla, steady, eyes open, ready to carry someone smaller than herself out of the dark. The summons arrived on a gray Monday morning, slipped under Naomi's blue door before she even heard the mail slot clang. Heavy cream paper, embossed with the seal of the Superior Court of Harbor City. Her name was printed in bold across the top, Naomi Elaine Brooks, followed by the case number that had already been whispered about in every corner of the city for weeks. "You are hereby commanded to appear." The words seemed to hum in the air as she read them, not from fear but from the weight of inevitability. She'd known this moment was coming, had felt it building in every meeting with Simone, in every call from Adrian where his voice carried both urgency and fatigue, in every side-eyed glance from neighbors, who were still deciding whether she was a troublemaker or a truth-teller. She took the summons to the kitchen table and set it down beside her. Chipped mug of tea, Outside, the bakery was waking mixers churning dough, the smell of cinnamon rolls curling through the air. Miss Alma's voice floated up through the floor, calling to one of the boys who delivered flour sacks. It was the same as any other. Morning in the district, yet everything in Naomi's chest told her the next days would not be ordinary. She didn't touch her tea. Instead, she stared at the court date, committing it to memory, then folded the paper back into its envelope and placed it under the worn Bible on the counter. Not because she needed divine intervention, though she wouldn't mind it, but because the Bible was the heaviest thing she owned, and some words deserved to be held down until the right moment came. The trial was scheduled for late November, which meant the air in Harbor City carried both the bite of winter and the restless buzz of holiday crowds. On the morning of her testimony, Naomi dressed with the deliberate care of someone suiting up for both battle and prayer. Dark navy skirt, pressed cream blouse, her sister's old wool coat with the missing top button, and the gold cross that had belonged to her grandmother pinned high against her collarbone. She tied her hair back in a neat bun, knowing the courtroom would be full of eyes waiting for a reason to dismiss her. If they were going to judge, let it be on the truth, not on a stray curl or a frayed cuff. Simone met her on the courthouse steps, the kind of stone steps that had seen too many stories end quietly under gavel strikes. "You ready?" Simone asked, her voice low but steady. Naomi took a slow breath, letting the cold air settle into her lungs. "I've been ready since that night in the garage," she said. Together they walked inside, past the security checkpoint where the guards eyed them with the detached courtesy of men who had seen every kind of trouble. The courtroom itself was colder than Naomi expected, the kind of chill that came from high ceilings and stone walls that didn't care who you were. The benches were already full reporters with their notepads poised, curious members of the public drawn by the headlines, and in the front row, a handful of parents whose faces were marked with the kind of grief that never fully fades. Adrian was there too, seated behind the plaintiff's table with his legal team, his suit immaculate but his eyes carrying the same quiet resolve Naomi had seen at the aquarium. Across from him sat the defense, 3 attorneys in tailored suits, and beside them, the facility's former director, a man whose calm expression looked rehearsed, and a woman Naomi recognized instantly, one of the high-profile donors named. In the article, her diamond earrings catching the light like they were daring anyone to look away. When Naomi's name was called, she rose and walked to the witness stand with a pace neither hurried nor hesitant. She placed her hand on the Bible offered by the bailiff, swore to tell the truth, and sat. From the corner of her eye, she could see Simone watching her like a lighthouse, steady, fixed, ready to guide her through any fog the defense might throw. The first questions were straightforward. Her name, her occupation, the events of the night she found Lila. Naomi answered in full sentences, painting the scene with careful, unembellished detail, the cold concrete of the parking garage, the sight of a small girl curled against a steel column, the worn bear clutched in her hands, the way she'd asked if Naomi's place was safe. She didn't flinch when she described Adrian's arrival, the shove that knocked her to the ground, the words he'd thrown at her like stones. She didn't embellish his apology either, but she told the truth of it, that it had been real enough for her to hear, and that it had been followed by action. Then came the harder part. Simone handed her a binder open to a series of documents. Naomi recognized from the manila envelope financial records, internal memos, email excerpts. "Ms. Brooks," Simone said, "did you review these materials in my office?" "Yes," Naomi replied. "Did you understand them to be records from the facility in question and its associated donors?" "Yes." "And based on your own experience, as well as what you witnessed in the days following your encounter with the child, do these documents support your belief that this facility engaged in harmful practices toward minors?" Naomi met Simone's eyes, then the judge's. "They don't just support my belief. They prove it." The defense took their turn, their lead attorney leaning on the podium like a man certain of his control. "Miss Brooks, you are not a trained investigator, correct?" "Correct. You have no degree in social work or criminal justice?" "No, I do not." "Then on what basis do you claim these records prove anything beyond your own interpretation?" Naomi didn't blink. on the basis that I know the difference between care and cruelty. And I know what I saw in that child's eyes. The attorney shifted, tried a different angle. Isn't it true that your name has been in the media recently and that this has brought you a great deal of attention? Naomi let a beat pass. Attention isn't always a blessing, sir. But if people are looking at me, I'd rather they see the truth than look away from it. A murmur rippled through the gallery, quickly hushed by the judge's gavel. When her testimony ended, Naomi stepped down from the stand without looking at the defense table. She returned to her seat beside Simone, her heartbeat steady in her ears. She had done what she came to do, not to win applause or headlines, but to put something into the record that couldn't be erased. Outside the courthouse, the air was sharp, the winter sun bright enough to sting her eyes. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones thrust forward, questions tumbling over each other. Miss Brooks, do you feel vindicated? What's your message to the donors? Are you afraid of retaliation? Naomi paused at the top step, looked out at the sea of faces, some eager, some skeptical, all hungry for something they could carry back to their readers or viewers. I'm not here for vindication, she said, her voice carrying in the cold air. I'm here so that children who have been hurt are not invisible anymore. And if that means my name stays in your mouths for a while, so be it. But make sure you get the story right. It's about them, not me. She didn't wait for follow-up questions. She descended the steps with Simone at her side, each step feeling less like an exit and more like an entry into whatever would come. Next, across the street, she caught sight of Adrian standing near a lamppost, his coat collar turned up against the wind. He met her gaze and gave a single nod, not of thanks, but of solidarity. And in that moment, Naomi knew the fight wasn't over. But neither was she. That night, back in her apartment, she finally poured herself a cup of tea and drank it while it was still hot. The blue door was locked, the street outside quiet except for the distant sound of gulls. She didn't know how the verdict would land or what new shadows might follow, but she knew this much: she had kept her promise. And in Harbor City, sometimes keeping a promise was the most radical act of all.